If you are someone who loves to express their creativity in any way possible, or if you have ever worked on a creative project and found yourself stuck or in need of inspiration, then I highly recommend The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. This book is for writers, musicians, filmmakers, or anyone that has a creative side to them. It is packed with insights that aren't usually talked about in various books of this nature. This book is oftentimes cryptic, poetic, metaphorical, has examples that may not be super relevant for everyone, but what this book provides is a unique take on art and artists and their inner struggles. And in this video, I will talk about some of my personal takeaways from the book that covers the entire process of creating art, because I thoroughly enjoyed it and made so many highlights and notes while reading it. It includes drawing inspiration from life around you, dealing with self-doubt, developing habits that promote creativity, and releasing your art to the world. So even if you don't consider yourself to be a creative person, I encourage you to stick around because there are some really valuable life lessons from this book that can be applied to any profession or inspire you to be more creative. Alright, so before you start any creative project, one thing to understand is what he calls the source. He believes that this is that place where all our creative ideas come from, and it is constantly available to us as a vast tool of wisdom that we can tap into. So this source may manifest itself in various forms such as dreams, intuitions, or other unknown ways, and sometimes may feel like it comes from within us, but it actually comes from the outside world. It's also what surrounds us. To understand what source is, think of the source as a cloud. Clouds do not emerge or disappear, they simply change shapes and forms. But no two clouds are the same. What makes each of them unique is how they emerge from the same constituents when they are mixed and matched in different ways. In fact, the idea that the newer complex systems can arise from the interaction of simpler elements is not new. It has been philosophized and talked about plenty of times. The word emergent was first coined by the philosopher G.H. Lewis in 1875, where he said, "Every resultant is either a sum or a difference of the cooperant forces. Their sum when their directions are the same, their difference when their directions are contrary." The creative ideas are pretty much the same. They often emerge from combining different concepts. So for example, the idea of a smartphone emerged from combining the concepts of a mobile phone and a personal computer. Or the genres of hip-hop and heavy metal when combined together resulted in rap rock. Or the zom-com-rom that combines three different genres: horror, romance, and comedy. Another book on this topic is Austin Kleon's book called Steal Like an Artist, which also talks about how everything that you want to create or write has already been created or written in some form. It's what you bring to it is then becomes your art. So to understand the source, think of it as something that's abundant in nature and it all exists out there. But it's how you synthesize some of the data from it in your own ways and bring it to life is what really creates art. Another thing that's important context of this book is the relationship between the awareness and the program. So the way he describes the two is that awareness is the gift of noticing what's happening around us, and program is that thing that's happening. It's the content that exists and happens whether we pay attention to it or not. So to understand it better, think of the awareness as you noticing the intricate patterns of leaves on a tree, but the program behind it is the biological processes that cause the leaves to grow in that pattern. Or when you see the unique color combinations in a sunset, that's awareness, but there's a program that decides the physical properties of light and atmosphere that create these colors. Or when you pay attention to a particular piece of music and feel the emotions, that's awareness. Whereas the composition and the arrangement of the music that creates those emotional effects could be the program. In each of these examples that I mentioned, the artist's awareness of their surroundings and the underlying program or the context that makes it possible can inform their creative processes. So by tapping into their awareness and understanding of the program, artists can create works that resonate more deeply with their audiences and convey a sense of meaning or emotions behind their technical skills. But to have an artistic mindset, it's crucial for us to tap into that awareness while also knowing that we can't really force it. It just happens. And once you have started the project and are looking for clues or ideas, he suggests to think of the world around you as a conveyor belt with stream of small packages on it. This is where most of the content can come from, especially when you hit a roadblock. So for instance, you could be writing a novel based on two characters that are lost in a wild forest. And let's say you're stuck in a particular chapter or a scene and don't know how to move forward. And then you happen to meet your friend Alex, who has just come back from a long vacation and is sharing the stories of the wild safari he's been on and how great it was. And if you pay attention, you can pick up the clues and facts from there. And that's a very specific example for a very specific project, but this kind of clue picking practice happens all of the time for creative people. For instance, Steve Jobs was inspired to create the iPod after a conversation with a friend about the difficulty of carrying around a large music collection. Edvard Munch created the iconic painting The Scream after he heard someone scream while walking along a bridge in Oslo, Norway. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa after seeing a woman in Florence, Italy. So the idea is that by simply paying attention to the conveyor belt of ideas and picking up the packages that you are interested in or the ones that you think belong to you can influence some or all of your creative content. But if we aren't paying attention, all of these clues that could have turned into these little blocks of ideas in the art that we want to create can go unnoticed. So the most important thing is to open up to the ideas and then pay attention to them. Another thing that the creators and artists often face is self-doubt. And it comes to us in various different ways. Is my work good enough? Or is my work unique enough? What are people going to think about it? Will it be accepted by the masses? The person X has done something around a similar topic, which is 10 times better than what I think I could ever do. These are some of the thoughts that often cripple us. And so the first thing is to acknowledge that self-doubt is not unique to a person. It's a part of the human nature, because if you look at the evolutionary biology, we developed self-doubt as a mechanism for various things like risk assessment, to survive in the wilderness, or to even use it as a tool to protect ourselves in the social cases where we don't feel socially rejected, or just for self-improvement. So it's helpful to think of self-doubt as this embedded, intangible component in our DNAs. It's helpful in keeping us alive in day-to-day activities, but when it comes to creating art, it can be severely paralyzing. So the way to climb this mountain of self-doubt is to understand that it is part of the process, and also accept the fact that the art actually represents the artist's state of mind. So if you're feeling insecure while creating art, then that insecurity or that self-doubt might just show up in your art. And that in some way is okay. The art doesn't have to be this perfect, polished masterpiece without any flaws in it. In fact, it needs to represent the artist's actual truth, his thought process, his artistic voice, his vulnerabilities. That's what makes great art. And this kind of approach also tends to take care of the comparison problem, because if the art in its truest form is all about you, with all your insecurities and self-doubt, then that automatically means that it cannot be compared with anyone else's work. So that little shift in your thinking process can really help you overcome the mountain of self-doubt. And it's also important to understand that once you have published the art, you may still dislike it, or the self-doubt may continue, but that's again a very common occurrence. There are singers who cringe every time they hear their own voices, and then there are actors who can't watch themselves in movies. But the audiences love them and their work exactly the way it's been created. But if the self-doubt is so much that the artist does not want to move forward with their work because the fear of judgment is too much, then the art is perhaps not for them. Which is not to say that they cannot create art, because they certainly can. It's just that no one would ever know about it, because you can only have one or the other. And here's a quote from the book that best describes it. If a creator is so afraid of judgment that they aren't able to move forward, it might be that the desire to share the work isn't as strong as the desire to protect themselves. Perhaps art isn't their role, their temperament might serve a different pursuit. This path is not for everyone. Adversity is part of the process. And I know that sounds like a very pessimistic way of looking at it, and you might be listening to this and thinking, well, I know I want to create things, but it's just that this initial hurdle of self-doubt that is stopping me, but that doesn't mean I cannot be an artist. Then the other way to look at it is that any piece of your work is not everything that represents you, and it's not going to define you forever. You are a work in progress, and all you can do is finish up a project, share it, and then move on to the next project. So again, that little shift in the mindset is something that can motivate us in moving forward with our work, encourage us to share it with the world, and overcome our self-doubt. In other words, perfectionism hinders the creative outflow and stops you from being productive. So it's important to know that we are not playing to win, we are playing to play. And ultimately, your desire to create must be greater than your fear of it. Artists also often have an internal struggle about how closely they should follow the rules of art. Some even get stuck or overwhelmed with what the trendsetters or the majority agree on. But the truth is that unlike science or maths or other disciplines of our daily lives, the artistic rules are merely assumptions, suggestions, hints, directions. They aren't absolutes. So the notion that if you break certain rules, then your art is going to fail isn't true and shouldn't hold us back from experimenting. And there are so many examples from all kinds of art that have proven this over and over again. For example, one of the rules in writing is a 3-act structure where you have a beginning and a middle and an end. But if you read J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, it doesn't follow a 3-act structure or a linear plot. The book meanders through the thoughts and experiences of its teenage protagonist, but yet this book is really influential and really popular. Or the famous song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen that doesn't follow the simple verse-chorus structure. In fact, it has multiple sections and styles, including an operatic section and a guitar solo. Or the movie Pulp Fiction, where the timelines are all over the place and don't follow the traditional narrative structures. The point is, some of the best creators are those that have learned the rules so well that they can look past them and create amazing art. And then you have the artists who never learned those rules. And in both these cases, you produce great work or learn a lesson. And it's important to know that both of those things, learning a lesson or creating great art, can be considered progress. Another area in which we often struggle a lot is forming or maintaining habits. So discipline and freedom may seem like the exact opposites, but they actually work really well together, because all of us have to do certain tasks each day to move forward in life. But if we don't have the discipline to do them at the right time, then those tasks either appear later and at the wrong time, or they affect the quality of our lives or our work. So the way to work around this is choosing your own method of doing those tasks. For example, certain authors love going to different cafes and crafting their novels, while certain musicians treat their studio time as a 9-to-5 job. Some love working from dusk till dawn, while others create 20-minute sessions with 5 minutes break between each. It all comes down to finding the most sustainable ritual that makes you do that thing. So wearing the same colored outfit, or a particular kind of socks, or drinking a certain flavor of tea while working on a project. You can choose your own habit or quirks and stick to it. It helps building the habit, and as we know, following a certain habit has compounding effects over time. Another way to make the whole process simpler is to put the decision making into the work and not into when to work, which basically implies that the more number of steps you reduce in decision making, the more free time you will have to do the actual work. So for instance, instead of spending time every morning deciding what to wear, a lot of artists or creators always wear the same color outfits, because they're not trying to use their time and energy every day in deciding what to wear, and instead focus on what really matters. Next thing that we all must have noticed in any kind of creative project is the strong attachment to the unfinished or the first draft of the project, which then makes it really difficult to carry on the project or finish it on time. In the music world, it's often called demoitis, which is basically a singer's rejection of any improvement of the work done by the producer or their sound engineers. And this happens because they are truly attached to the idea of their first draft. They have worked on it for so long and then worked and reworked on them and heard it so many times that it's hard for them to accept any changes to it. But I think it's not just limited to musicians and music as the art form. You could be writing and rewriting a novel for 3 years, and the moment it goes to a copy editor and they make certain changes to improve the quality of your manuscript, you would instantly feel like they're messing up the work or the quality of your unique author's voice. So it happens to all of us in different forms. So the way to overcome is detaching yourself from the first draft by not continuously redoing the first draft and by not accepting the work in progress as the standard version. This leaves the room for growth and change. So basically what this means is that practicing detachment is a vital aspect of the creative process that artists need to cultivate, because attachment to the first draft or the unfinished project can lead to stagnation and hinder the overall process. Also, a lot of times we only have limited expertise and need to work with others who are great at what they do. So for example, you could be a songwriter and a singer, but you would still need a sound engineer to make your work sound better. So the idea is that by letting go of our attachment to the initial version of our work and embracing collaboration, we can improve our creative output and achieve our artistic goals. Another thing about creating project is the monotony that may hit sometime during the project, where we may feel like we're not making any progress. In the case of writing, it can be the famous writer's block, where we don't know what to do next, and that we have run out of all the great ideas, and what's remaining or available to us is not exciting or worth pursuing. And so how to deal with such a stagnation? One approach to overcome this is to break down larger tasks into smaller ones and doing a fraction of the work each day. It could just be writing a passage for your next novel instead of committing to write the whole chapter, and not worrying about the quality of the work. And if you're a songwriter, it could just be writing one line of a song that you want to create. The idea is that if you are committed to doing at least a little each day, you'll be able to reopen the creative channels at some point. What could also work is looking at the same piece of art but from different perspectives, putting yourself in other people's shoes and seeing how would they craft the piece that you are working on. What kind of artistic choices would they make? How would your favorite author flesh out a particular character or a scene? Or how would your favorite YouTuber approach a topic? What kind of color choices or themes he would go for? The idea is to experiment with as many different scenarios as possible from different mediums and with the help of different tools to climb over that creative wall. Alright, so when it comes to finishing a project, we often have two major internal problems. The first problem is letting go of the project, and the second problem is putting the other creative ideas for a different project away until we have finished the primary project. The first problem is an actual problem. The second one is actually a good problem to have, given that we don't get consumed by the other ideas and discard the first project. The not letting go of the project happens because we often feel like that the work we have done will forever define us. So we go back to perfecting it forever, redoing it, trying to achieve the perfection, making sure it is the best work that we have ever produced. And all of this can make us want to discard the entire project at times. And that's obviously not a healthy or a sane approach. We don't need to think of how the work will be received. Instead, we just need to do our part and release it without bothering about the consequences. Because there are a lot of artists in this world, but we only know about the ones who overcame this hurdle and were able to release their work for the world to see it. The second problem of juggling a lot of creative ideas while working on a primary project is very common. It happens to all of us. The moment we are deep into some kind of project, suddenly we get another half a dozen ideas and they all seem great. They seem alluring, they seem exciting, and we can't wait to work on each of them. But that's when it's important to understand that because we haven't started working on them yet, we don't know what kind of issues we might face while actually doing the work. And that we are getting these initial sparks of excitement that is derailing us from the actual project at hand. So one approach could be to just jot down all the bubbling ideas in one place, because they're still great ideas and at least they're getting us excited, and then wait until we have finished our main project. Tell ourselves that we are not going to pursue anything else until we have finished the actual work. And in that process, you will notice that most of the times the ideas that seem like worth working on reduce significantly, and the ones that remain give us a realistic understanding of how difficult or easy they are going to be to pursue. Alright, one last piece of advice that I think is super relevant is holding on to great ideas and waiting for a special occasion to release them. It happens with comedians and their jokes, it happens with singers and their best songs, with dancers and their performances. We're always waiting for that perfect moment to arrive where we feel like we will get the appropriate recognition for the art. So for instance, a comedian could be saving a joke forever to say it on a live television, or a rapper could be saving a punchline or a quadruple entendre for a big special occasion or a feature with another artist. And the reason why we do it is because we think we have limited creativity and limited ideas and we store them. But if we go back to the first point of this video where we talked about the source, we know that the ideas that flow through us are unlimited, abundant. So we don't need to restrict them, hoard them. Instead, we need to release them with the trust that more will come. In fact, they will only come if we release the ones that we already have. Alright, so there you have it. Those are some of the takeaways from this book. I really highly recommend this book to anyone who is in the process of creating things. Like I said, you don't have to be a famous artist or a novelist or a musician working on a grand feature film. You could apply these tips even if you create posts for your social media pages or have a blog that you often update, or even if you aspire to excel in your professional life that involves a little bit of creativity. Because things like self-doubt, imposter syndrome, writer's block, stagnation with projects, all of these things happen to all of us in some shape or form, and it's only after reading a book like this, which is full of really relatable pieces of advice, we understand that even the greatest artists in the world go through the same. It's just part of the process. So if you watched this video until now, please let me know what are some of the things that you struggle with in your work and how you overcome them. And that's all for this video. I'll see you next time.